bunch of, yeah, just run it over a bunch of times. Pull the wood up into here like you did the other day, yesterday. I say pull the wood up into here like you did yesterday and make a pile back farther. So I'd run this top over a little bit first. Not that it does much good out here.
Cell phone.
Yeah, no cell service. You go up there.
You had to call somebody?
If I had to call somebody, I was just checking the time.
Oh, you take a break for lunch or you work straight on through?
I work up until lunch. I usually bring my lunch out in the woods. Let's go to the next ones.
Okay.
Well, now I'll wedge it over.
Wedge it over.
Yep. Hopefully it goes where I want. Eric, if you want to stand behind that double oak right there, while I wedge it over, that way you're protected by that tree and you can still see. Eric, I think we'll edit that one.
That was good. What was wrong with that?
It's hung up.
Oh, it's not supposed to do that, huh?
No, it's supposed to hit the ground.
Oh my. Well, I hope I'm not making you nervous, Norm. Just don't pay attention. I hope I'm not making you nervous. Just do.
No, I had a heavy side lean and I used a tongue and groove to hold it.
Uh-huh.
And we'll pull that out with the skidder later.
Well, I heard you say that this is a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun.
What makes it so much fun?
It's something different every day. It's never the same thing. You never know what's going to happen. Something could break, something could not. Stuff like that.
And if something breaks, what do you do?
I usually fix it.
You fix it yourself?
Mostly, yes.
Uh-huh. Where did you learn mechanics?
Self-taught.
Self-taught?
Taking stuff apart, figuring out how it works.
Uh-huh. And where did you learn logging?
Same thing. I worked for Gary O'Kane for a short period of time, and that was it. Other than that, I've worked for myself in the woods solely.
And how long you been doing it?
21 years.
Really? Can you describe the process of clearing the woods?
Clearing or logging?
Logging.
Well, logging, first you got to designate your boundaries. Then you go through and you mark the trees you want to harvest with either blue or orange paint. And then you make an agreement with the landowner and harvest the timber, one tree at a time.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I skid to the landing, sometimes I short skid and buck for the forwarder. And other than that, that's about it. But when I do a building lot, I go through with the feller buncher and cut all the small stuff with that first, and then go back through and figure out what I want to leave and what I want to cut by hand.
What do you do in your free time, or do you have any free time?
In my free time, I help my other half with the horses and my mother-in-law with her cheese business.
Uh-huh. Do you hunt or fish?
I do hunt, I do fish, I just haven't done much of it over the past couple of years.
Uh-huh.
Just been working.
Okay. I guess that's it.
I guess that's it? Okay.
Thank you, Norm.
That didn't take too long.
No.
Alrighty, well, I gotta try and beat the frost before it leaves the ground.
Okay.
So, alrighty, that works.
Great. This machine is called a hydroaxe. It was invented in 1965 to clear brush, but was improved years later to cut bunches of small trees. That's why it's also known as a feller buncher. It weighs approximately 27,000 pounds and runs on about 150 horsepower. Its claws grab a tree, blades sever it, and the apparatus lifts it. where should we start? Do you want to start with how you met?
Well, how we met was an interesting story in that both of us commuted into Manhattan for our jobs, and we had mutual friends who kind of pushed us together because we were the only two non-drinkers basically on the 604 bar car.
On Metro North.
On Metro North.
Yeah.
So they kind of, and I was looking for somebody that knew a little bit about computers because I was just getting into them, and she seemed to know, so we happened to meet, talked, found out that I like motorcycles, she was interested in motorcycles, so we started dating, and then it was just kept going until we ended up getting married.
And where was that?
1995.
Very good. That's great. So you both you lived up here, but you were commuting to Manhattan?
Well, we lived in here. We lived in Trumbull.
We lived in Trumbull, Connecticut, and let's see, in what time? About year 2000, both of us kind of burned out working in Manhattan, and 5 hours of commuting a day, because it was 2.5 hours each way to both of our jobs.
So we had a lot of time to get to know each other on the train.
Yeah.
Well, that's romantic.
Well, we had to drive to the train station, we had to go into Manhattan, we had to take the subway, and both of us had to walk to the final destination, so it took some time. And we just, one night we were sitting down at our favorite pub that, because you get home about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we both look at each other and say, oh, I'm too tired, I don't feel like cooking, or I don't feel like cooking. So we said, well, let's pop down there. And we popped down there, and just one night, it was, serendipitous. We felt, this has got to stop, we're dying, we're killing ourselves. So decided to turn in our resignations and do something different.
First.
She did first, and then I finally, was able to talk my boss and let me go, because the bottom line is he said, I can't let you go until you replace yourself. And it took me 8 months to replace myself.
Now, what type of work were you doing, and what type of work were you doing in Manhattan?
Well, I was doing financial conferences for Wall Street. I would bring together institutional investors and the people who consulted with them, the money managers and the consultants and folks like that. And I did that for a good long time, 14, 15 years. And then when I bailed, which Greg just mentioned, I was a financial journalist, and I worked for pension magazines and wrote about pretty much the same things I'd been doing conferences on. And I'd always been a writer all my life, so that was just a natural extension for me. I had written previously about upscale lifestyle subjects and high-tech gadgets when VCRs were high-tech, and cable TV was brand new, so that's when I was writing in that area. And I had just wanted to do more writing, and that was my goal in life, but had to make money in the meantime, so Wall Street seemed to have a lot of it, and I decided to take a little bit of it.
That was smart. So where did you go to school to learn all this?
Well, I didn't.
You didn't go to the university?
I did go to university. I went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and I was a theater major.
Oh, really? How interesting.
So it didn't teach me much about writing, and it didn't teach me much about finance.
Uh-huh.
I pretty much picked that up as I went.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. And you're working on your third book right now.
Working on my third book about negotiation strategies for women.
How did you happen to open a cafe? It seems so distant from your other, both of your other interests.
Well,
let me do this one.
Okay, you do this.
Okay. The first book I wrote, Career Match, was written with a lady named Shoya Zichi, another brilliant woman, who has developed the Color Q personality assessment system. And Shoya and I worked together doing financial conferences in New York, and I'd known her since 1989, 1990, and at that point in time she was developing the Color Q assessment system. So Greg and I were her guinea pigs. We would take test after test after test, and we were very deeply tested on our personality styles. And we learned from this, and we started incorporating some of the things we had learned about each other and our personality styles into the decision-making process about going forward with what we wanted to do in the future. And so that was pretty much the genesis of it. We took a look at what our strengths were, and my strength was writing. Greg's strength was cooking. He's incredible. And we just started thinking, well, how can we combine these things? Another strength I had was stage management, which is very helpful in running a restaurant. Neither of us had really had restaurant backgrounds. I'd worked as a waitress in college. That was about it. Greg, you were a baker for a while.
I baked, I cooked, short order cooked, and did some of the back, sauce cooking, the sauce making, and, odds and sods, but I was still in university, so.
Yeah, this is both in our college
That
years.
wasn't a career path for me at the time. It never was, and I never thought it would be.
What was your idea for a career at that time?
Well, I had 33 years in corporate America. I was an industrial hygienist, biosafety officer for corporations. Ended up at the New York Blood Center, which I resigned from, and I was their director of health, safety, and environmental protection for the corporation. So that's But when we went through the color Q system, I found that I wasn't a desk type person. I was a risk management type guy. I wanted to go in when there was an explosion, a meltdown of some type of problem with the federal government, the state government, the town government, where they were saying, oh, you did something environmentally or safety-wise, and either negotiate with them or show them that, no, that wasn't correct. So, I was a risk manager and problem solver. And as soon as I got to the point with the programs where I was just sitting in a desk and monitoring ongoing programs, I got bored. And that's where I was after 10 plus years, 15 years at the Blood Center, is that I was getting bored with the job because I was doing more desk work than actually a lot of field work. And that's when both of us came to the conclusion that, hey, time to make a change. And so we started looking for properties, and because I have a side business is selling motorcycle parts, vintage motorcycle parts, British stuff, and I thought, hey, it'd be fun to be able to incorporate that little niche with something else. And we first, after trips to London, trips not to London, but to England, we met a lot of people that were encouraging us to get a pub going.
Yeah.
An old
With
English.
hand-pulled beers.
Yeah, they wanted, they said, well, America doesn't have really, at that time, America didn't have any real old-fashioned pub type. Maybe a few, but not many. And this one company in England said, well, they would support us, they would put in the equipment, they would sell us beer if we set up an old English pub. We said, and we went that way. Our original business plan was to make this a pub.
And it supported, the motorcycle business because it's basically antique British motorcycle parts. So as a business plan, it
looked good on paper.
Seemed right.
But then we sat back over a glass of wine or a beer, I think, and we decided, wait a minute, we got a problem. Number one is that I wanted to encourage friends and new friends to come up here as a destination, a riding destination. And I said, I really don't feel comfortable about having them come up here, have a few beers, and then go back on the road.
Right.
So we said, we better give this some thought. And the other thing is just legally, there's a school, there's a church, there's another place with a liquor license. I think.
There's a lot of neighbors very close by. We didn't want them to be disturbed.
With a bar going till 2 o'clock in the morning. So we said, we better rethink this. And that's when we thought, well, let's do it. Let's do a cafe. Simple cafe.
Well, people kept coming in when we were renovating this place. It took us a year to renovate this space that we're in right here, which is the cafe, to the standards that we had to have it. And during that time, people would stop in, and they'd stop in to see what we were doing, ask, what our plans were. And inevitably, all of them said, "Are you going to reopen the cafe?"
Because there was a cafe,
There was a cafe
small
here
cafe
previously.
here. And they said, are you going to, we need our coffee, we need this. And so we said,
Well, that's what they need. Let's give them what they need.
and, that was 13 years ago. So it's,
Has it really been 13 years?
13 years this May 22nd, I think.
That's great. Were you both living in Trumbull when you discovered Falls Village?
Yes.
Yes.
what we had originally decided, what we did was we took a map and we put a pin in where we lived, and then we put 5-mile circles around it, and we started looking inside those circles for properties to buy that, one, we could afford, number two, that we could get the right zoning. And we bought 2 other properties prior to buying this place.
Well, put money down.
We
on
put
it.
money down. We didn't buy it. We put money down, good earnest money. And we found out, one, we couldn't get the right zoning. Another one, we walked the neighborhood and talked to people, and they were really upset with the idea of maybe motorcycles coming into town, their town. And they weren't interested really in having a commercial operation of any time in the neighborhood. So we said, I'm not going to fight neighbors. So then we happened to drive up here. We'd driven here during our honeymoon. And I said, well, let's go further north. Because the prices down there were, we looked at Colebrook, we looked at Shelton, we looked at some other places. And the prices were they were still high.
Higher than we could afford.
Higher than we could walk in, because the bottom line is we wanted to walk in this place with no mortgage. Any place we went, we didn't want to have to pay a mortgage, because we figured that'd be a game killer if the business didn't go well. The property would be at risk. So
Yeah.
we kept looking and looking and looking and looking. We finally came down here, up here, because I'd ridden here on my bikes many, many times. And I said, well, it's a neat little town. So we drove through, and this happened to have a sign in front of it. We said, well, we got another guy, one of the real estate guys in the neighborhood.
Ray Shine, I think it was. Ray Shine.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still in business or not, but I said, hey, look up and see what kind of properties you have available. Well, this was one of them that he could get some information on. And we looked at 3 others, and then we drove by this. I mean, within 15 minutes, we knew this was the place.
Yeah.
We put a bid on it on a Saturday because people were out of state. We figured, well, we'll lowball them, we'll see what happens, and we'll start the negotiation process. Man, we sent the bid out to them. They came back on Monday via via express mail, agreeing to all our terms and the price, and then we looked at each other and said, oh my God, what did we do?
Now what?
Now what?
So you've got this beautiful little business going here. What is your secret to running a good, successful family business? How do you live together and work together? And
You hit the nail on the head. It's a family business, and both Annie, she's better at it than I am because I get grumpy, but she's a real people person, and I think we respect our customers. We want to give them an experience that they won't have someplace else. They're not talking to an 18-year-old that's just kind of taking their number and saying, well, do you want, you want mayo and ketchup on that? No, we're interested in what they want, and we were interested in preparing good food. We don't have a lot of variety, but good food, high quality, the way somebody likes it. And we make mistakes, and we just want people to say, hey, you didn't do this quite right. Well, we'll make it right. And that's, we care about the customer. We want them to come back. Like I tell a lot of people, I can get you in here the first time if you're just curious about what we are. But to get you back, I got to do something that you like, that you come back. And we have people that have been since day one coming back.
I read your reviews on Yelp, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
People are just fall in love with this place when they come here.
Well, my goal, sitting up front and taking the orders and greeting people as they come through the door, and that was very important to me. We set up the whole operation so that the first thing people saw when they came in was the person who was going to greet them. Because I really don't like to walk into a restaurant and wonder what I'm supposed to do next or where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
And so we set it up so that they were taken care of from the minute that they walked in the door. And my goal is to assess people's moods the moment that they walk in the door and make them happier by the time they leave.
And we meet
by
them.
taking care of them and, I'm sorry?
Well, we meet them at the door and we say goodbye when they leave.
And we try to make it right in the meantime.
And try to make it right in the meantime. And we don't try to rush people. We're limited because of Torrington area health regulations to 15 seats in the cafe.
And two of those are
Two
ours.
of those are ours. We account. So we have basically space for 13. So yes, during our busy times, things get a little chaotic and there's a wait. We try to make people understand why the wait. I'm the only person cooking other than Annie if they order something that she can handle, like the waffles or something like that. But,
or soup or pastries. I can do all that.
She can do all that, and she does she's a barista, trained barista, so she can do cappuccinos, lattes, espressos.
I've trained on that for 13 years.
Yeah. So
I love that part of my job. I love
So-
it.
And asking how many people we would need to start seeing things happening. How often do you go?
Okay. Let's watch and see what happens.
You go by yourself?
No, when you're applying, you really need another person to spot you.
Yeah,
To do a piece with there. On Wednesday, there's a.
Yeah.
Same time, same place, on Wednesday.
Happy Easter.
but we get behind, and as long as people say, hey, chill, have a seat, have a cup of coffee. If it's a good summer day and it's a weekend, you go look at the motorcycles that are usually parked out there. There's usually a lot of interesting iron out cars, bikes, you name it. So we can't be a white tablecloth place. I don't have the equipment to do it, but I can do good breakfast and I can do decent lunches.
Now, behind the scenes is the other part of it, and that goes back to the color cue system, because we apportion what needs to be done in here according to our personality strengths. And he is someone who thinks in the present and is very good with managing crises, and he's very hands-on mechanically. So he handles all the repairs and all the breakdowns and all the immediate snafus, yeah. And I'm more of a future thinker and a big picture thinker and more artistic, and I don't think in a linear fashion. So if you watch me work behind there, I will go from one thing to another, to another, to another, but it all gets done. But we don't criticize each other's ways of working. We just,
Occasionally we get, you can't be 24/7 with somebody without getting on each other's nerves from time to time. So we get grumpy with one another. But
I think if grumpy's the worst of it, that's pretty darn good.
we always step back and say, oh man, that was just had a bad day, or I had a bad day, I shouldn't have said that. And we apologize and go forward.
Yeah.
So, we've been
Because
together.
24/7 is very demanding. Some people can do it and some people can't. And if you're, always
And I used to be a
challenging
heavy
each other.
smoker. I was a pipe smoker and a cigar smoker, and since we have a very small apartment upstairs, I don't do that anymore. Plus, she's harangued me about my health, so I don't have that out. So
Yeah, we both have our weak spots, and we just try to have each other's backs on the weak spots.
How would you describe Falls Village and what you like most about it?
it's Brigadoon. It comes out of the mist, and it's an exciting little town if you let it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the Sedona of the East. Sedona, Arizona
Yeah.
in the east. The geographic or the geologic makeup of the area, a lot of iron in the soil, mining. I mean, it seems to be a vortex, a little vortex for creative people such as my wife. And if you look around the town, we have met more interesting people here, communicated with more talented people here than we ever did in Trumbull, Connecticut. And I've done anywhere in my career, moving from California, Colorado, Philadelphia to here. You know, playwrights, artists, musicians, you name it. Writers, I'm sorry, playwrights. They're all in this little area, and it is so stimulating. And, you know, and everybody kind of looks and says, well, I wonder why everybody got here. I think there's something mystical about this little village that kind of draws creative people together. And it gave us an opportunity to really get involved with the town, a village that never had an opportunity to do any place else in the country.
How do you participate in the village?
Well, Annie's on committees with the sidewalk committee, and they have the what do they call it, the Falls Village.
The Historical Society?
The Historical Society she's been involved with, and the Main Street Action Committee.
Me and Laura Warrens.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, and then I got involved with P&Z, you know, so I've been on P&Z for a number of years.
Republican Town Committee.
Republican Town Committee.
I'm a Democrat.
She's a Democrat.
Born and raised Chicago Daily Democrat.
So, you know, we've gotten as much time as we can afford. We try to give back, and then one of our corporate policies, and it upsets some people, is that since we opened, we've never done any print advertising. No radio, no television, no print advertising. What we've done with the budget that we kind of allocate towards advertising, we give to the local
Not-for-profits.
Not-for-profits. So the children's theater, the schools, you know, whatever some kid comes in and says, hey, we're doing this basketball thing, we will donate what we can to those. But they're all not-for-profits, local not-for-profits. I like to keep it within the village. Scholarship funds, you know, things like that.
Housatonic regional high school events, sports, theater.
Well, the people with the singing, you know,
The
choir,
Choral Society,
the choral
Litchfield County Choral Society.
You know, those are the
Falls
things.
Village Children's Theater.
So these are things that we like to donate to rather than spend it on a television spot or a newspaper spot that.
I mean, in the summer, we are really, really crowded, and it's only Greg and I and usually one other part-time person working. We can't handle but a certain amount of business, and we get that business in the summer, so we're not really looking for more. Love to have some more business in the winter, but
Yes.
that's the way that it is. You know, so it's not really, we don't have a normal business in regards to, oh yeah, you have to grow. We're kind of as much as we can do, although I have to say this year it's been rough with the bridge being out. We haven't certainly hit our numbers at all. And of course this past winter was brutal. So this year is atypical for that. But we'll see what the summer.
Yeah, in the past years, we've just been cranking along, and being just the two of us.
Can only do so much. I mean, we turn people away most Saturdays and Sundays.
Is that right?
Yeah, because they come in there's no seating because it's crowded.
Or it's a 45-minute wait,
And we
which I hate.
which we tell people up front. I try to guesstimate. Okay, I got this many tickets. It's going to take me X amount of time to get them out. So I want people to know that, hey, you're going to wait. I hate to go into a restaurant and somebody says, well, we'll seat you immediately, and then you sit there twiddling your thumbs for an hour waiting for somebody to come and take your order. Or if you give your order, you take 45 minutes to an hour waiting for it. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather people know up front what the wait time is. So that seems to have worked out. Some people will say, oh, that's okay, so they'll go walk around the town and come back. Or they'll go out and look at the motorcycles and come back. Or they'll say, well, we'll catch you next time.
And the regulars take care of them too. The people who aren't as familiar with the wait, our regulars will say, hey, chill out, relax, get some coffee, come and watch, what we're going to do with this motorcycle, or come and talk to us. And they kind of incorporate them into the fold.
And I think that one of the things that have kept us going.
Yeah.
No surprises.
There's always surprises.
There are always surprises. There's always surprises.
One Saturday evening in March, the D.M. Hunt Library hosted a reception for Falls Village artist Sergei Fedorjaczenko. We asked Sergei to share with us the stories behind his creations.
We'll just start at piece number one. This piece I call tree rings. And how this came about is I was stacking wood one day a few years ago and picked up this piece and noticed the beautiful grain patterns in it, and I thought it was just too nice a piece to burn. So I set it aside thinking that at some point I might do something interesting with it. How I like to work with primarily with sculpture is I like to use found objects, and the rings are pieces of an old disk drive that I worked with many years ago. And it was a crashed disc, and I took it apart and found those rings separating the platters in the disc. And they looked like they had potential for a sculpture, so I saved them. And when I was thinking about what to do with that piece of wood, the thought occurred to me that if I take something very tectonic, very industrial like the rings, and combine them with the natural forms of the wood, it might be an interesting contrast. How this one came about is, again, it was found material. I was at the dump one day and I noticed someone had discarded one of these car shelters with steel tubes and a vinyl that covers it. I guess it had blown over in the wind and gotten wrecked, so I took all of the tubes home thinking that they would make a good source of material for something. This piece I call Matrix. Again, the rods are found materials. I happen to have a lot of scrap walnut that I picked up at a tag sale, nice thick walnut stock, and I began conceptualizing what I might do with small pieces of wood and metal rods, and the thought occurred to me that I could put them together like a model of a molecule, where you see the balls and the sticks and so forth. And then I thought, well, I'll add a little bit of cubistic feel to it and make them all cubes and arrange them in cubes. These pieces I call my number series. They were the first 4 that I've done, and I'm working on a few additional ones. I always loved automobiles and racing, and always thought the feature of having the big discs on them with the numbers was kind of an interesting feature that you see on race cars. So I thought I would emphasize that in my paintings. And these are done in gouache. I like gouache because it's a water-based medium. It gives you a little bit of flexibility, and it's not as hard to do as watercolors. In that gouache is like watercolors, but it's opaque, so you can add layer upon layer of paint without compromising what's underneath it. And these are my watercolors. Watercolor, I think, is a very difficult medium. I've been attempting to get better at it through the years, but it comes very slowly. With watercolors, you have to think backwards. You have to work from light to darks, so you have to really visualize what the final painting will be like, and then select your lighter areas, begin working on those, and then adding colors and intensities on top of those.
Now this item down here is so fascinating. You'll have to pick that up for us and move it around.
This I call tape in a box.
Tape? What kind of tape is that?
This is VHS tape.
Oh, is that right?
I was undoing a VHS cassette, and as I began unreeling the tape, I noticed that it was folding onto itself. I thought to myself, well, it'd be kind of neat if I could capture that, maybe between 2 pieces of glass or something like that.
Now we come to your magnificent mosaics.
This one I call Reflections, and as you can see, it vibrates. And what the genesis of this was, I noticed that CD discs in the sunlight refract the light quite wonderfully. They throw off all kinds of prismatic colors, and I thought there's something I got to be able to do with that feature in a sculpture. So the thought came to me, well, if I cut them into little pieces and then mount them mount them as mirrors on little springs, then as they move slightly, they would throw off all of these reflections in different directions. And when the sunlight is falling on it, it throws out a wonderful array of light and color. And now we come to the pencil drawings, and I notice one of them has been taken at this point.
Well, good. Congratulations.
Actually, it was a fairly successful show in that the ones with the red dots on them did sell.
Oh, good.
But I think who bought this one probably wanted to get it to their home. I love working in pencil. I think this is the medium that I am most comfortable with. And because of my industrial design background, I'm very good at depicting detail. So I take my most comfortable medium and take my propensity for working with detail, and I come up with these pencil drawings, which I just love doing. And now we get to my oil paintings. And I like working with oil because oil is a vibrant medium, and oil is also forgiving in the sense that if you put down something and aren't particularly pleased with it, you can scrape it off and rework it. And since I'm not the best painter, I like having that flexibility to redo things if they don't quite come out the way I want them to be. I also have a love of airplanes, that's why I painted that scene. This is a Jaguar XK140, and this is done in acrylic. Acrylic works similar to oil, but it does dry faster. So you don't quite have the same flexibility. And the interesting thing about this painting is that I began this about 25 years ago. I worked on it one summer, and I had a preconceived idea of what I wanted to look like, and it wasn't turning out the way that I was hoping it would. And I think by not having worked on it for so long, and two, sort of I developed kind of a freer way of thinking about my artwork, in that if it's not turning out the way I wanted to or I had imagined it would, then, well, let's play with it and see how it does turn out. And this piece is, I call Order, Chaos, and Order, because it's got smooth edge, a chaotic edge, and a smooth edge. And the way this one came about is in doing all of the work that I was doing on the restoration of our house, I was cutting a lot of trim pieces, baseboards, changing a lot of windows and doorways, and I wound up with a very big box, cardboard box of scraps, little pieces of pine that I just didn't want to burn. I thought it was too nice to burn, but then I'm looking at this big cardboard box of scraps thinking, what am I going to do with it? And decided, okay, I'll make a sculpture out of it. And that's a quick tour of my 2014 show at the Hunt Library.
Thank you so much, Sergei.
You're very welcome, Eric. When I was a kid, I was drawn to art, but my parents convinced me that I probably ought to be thinking about something more practical as a career, which sort of led me to engineering. And I started out in engineering. I wound up going to 2 years of engineering school and dropped out for a time, at which point I was drafted. and spent 2 years in the Army.
When was that, Sergei?
It was 63 to 60, no, I'm sorry, 65 to 67.
Right in the midst of the Vietnam
Just
era.
when it was ramping up.
Uh-huh.
I was fortunate enough to go to Germany. And once in Germany, the coincidence was I was born in Heidelberg, and the Army stationed me just outside of Heidelberg in a town called Schwetzingen. So it was kind of like a homecoming. But I wound up becoming an Army photographer. And that's what I did primarily for my tour in Germany. These are the types of photographs that I took in the Army. This is our unit building a temporary panel bridge. I did a lot of coverage of visiting dignitaries. More visiting dignitaries. Here's an aerial shot I took out of a helicopter of our base that I was stationed at.
Had you had photographic experience when you went into the Army?
I did, only as a hobby.
Uh-huh.
Just for my own interest as a kid. But I knew enough of the process to volunteer to be the photographer. Our photographer, his time in Germany was up. He was rotating back to the States, and they were scrambling around trying to replace him. And I said, I know something about photography. And it was the only thing I ever volunteered for in the Army.
Well, that was a wise...
It was.
Yes. Yeah.
So I had a darkroom, and I also had a portable darkroom on the back of a truck, a 3/4-ton Dodge truck, so that when we went on maneuvers, I had a darkroom to work out of out in the field.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
So after my stint in the Army, I then really began examining what it was that I wanted to do for a career, and I knew engineering. I was sort of leaning towards going back to engineering, but while I was I had always been interested in cars. Drawing, I drew cars, I made little clay models of cars, which I still do to this day. I have a whole bunch over there that we can look at. So I wrote a letter to General Motors and said, I'm in the Army, I'd like to design cars when I get out. What kind of education do I need to pursue to do that? And the director of design at General Motors wrote me a personal letter, said you need to study industrial design, which when I got out, I researched schools, and that's what I did.
Where did you go to school?
I wound up going to the University of Bridgeport. So when I graduated, I just began looking for jobs, and I wound up working in a variety of fields, which was very enjoyable. I designed everything from switches, circuit breakers, small appliances, toys and games. I designed guns for a couple of years for Colt Manufacturing. My last job before I retired was working for a company that did cosmetics packaging. And I designed perfume pumps, lipstick containers, things of that nature. This would have been a presentation drawing for this combination of bottle and cap for a client. And I also designed the inner workings of the perfume pumps. During my career, computers began becoming the popular way of drawing, designing, and presenting products. And I became very good at that, and was sort of on the forefront of the technology as it developed. So these were all done on computer.
Is that right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Skip ahead to my work with
firearms.
With guns, I worked on the Colt 1911 and the Colt Army pistol.
Had you had a background in guns? Have you?
No, I
How did-
actually didn't know anything about guns. They hired me primarily for my computer graphics expertise. I also did a lot of design for switches and circuit breakers. And this is a computer-generated model of a circuit breaker showing the inner workings. I also did some small appliance design. I did some interior design work. This was for a restaurant in Wethersfield. The G. Fox and Company department store in Hartford, they hired me as a consultant to do a layout of their Christmas displays.
So what actually is an industrial designer?
An industrial designer is someone who works on the design of the product with not just from the aspect of engineering, but how the product looks, how the product would work for the end user, the ergonomics of a product, the appearance of a product, the ease of use.
Your wife Zoe is an artist too in her own right, isn't she?
She is. She never had any training as an artist, but she has a very good eye and a very good appreciation for art. And when she has the time, she likes to dabble in it.
And when did you become interested in sculptures?
Oh, almost all my life. I would say since I was a little kid, because some of the kinds of toys that I had were erector sets, Tinker toys, and I had a product called American Bricks. It was very much like what Legos are, but it was meant to be more of an architectural modeling toy than Legos, where you can just about build anything with them. But I wound up building just about anything with my American Bricks. Actually, I still have some here. So because I always made things, I think that was a natural extension to sculpting. When I became interested in cars and realized that that's how they designed and developed cars, by making clay models, I began making my own little clay models of cars. And I'd say that started when I was maybe 13 or so, and continues to this day.
Have you ever designed a full-scale car?
Well, I'm working on a design right now. This is a 1/8 scale. And what it is a recreation of I would term it pre-war, post-war type of design in automobiles. And what my intention with this is, I have many Fiat parts, and I intend to build a chassis and build a body and actually build this car.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, a Sergei Fedorjaczenko original.
That's right.
Am I pronouncing your name right?
You are.
I practiced for
I
weeks.
don't think I would ever call a car that, because it wouldn't just easily roll off people's tongues. This is my 1970 Fiat 124 Spider. This is the last in a long line of these that I've had. And
Go ahead,
in
Sergei.
the car over there is my 1958 Fiat Alemano Spider. I will put the hood on so you get a better sense.
Oh, yeah, that's a racing car, isn't
It
it?
is.
How fast will it go?
Not all that fast. It is. It's based on Italy's Fiat 600 sedan. And what Abarth did with it, Abarth is kind of like the Shelby of Italy. They would buy the sedans, strip the body off of them, use the chassis and the motors, and soup up the motors and build a handmade aluminum body for them. And this car, there were only about, it's very difficult to determine exact numbers, but it's estimated there were only about 200 to 300 of this particular car made.
So it's a real collector's item.
It is. Because it's based on a small sedan, a subcompact sedan with a small motor, it's only 750 cc's. Originally the car had approximately 25 horsepower, and after Abarth was finished with them, they put out 50 to 55 horsepower. So it was a significant improvement, but still the top speed of this car is probably just under 100 miles an hour.
What year did
It's
this?
a 1958.
1950. Can you show us the motor?
I can. Well, I can show you where the motor... Do you have enough light in here?
I think so, yeah. Everything with me is automatic.
Okay, it's a rear engine car, so the motor goes back here. And last year I rebuilt the motor, and it's ready to put back in.
Aha! You rebuilt the motor! Sergei, you're amazing!
Well, it's a matter of necessity.
So you love not only painting and drawing and inking these things?
I love getting my hands dirty.
Well, good for you. That's interesting. And that's going to go right in here.
That's correct.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I should have turned the lights on.
No, I have plenty of light.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing.
And when we bought the property, this barn down here was where they kept the animals. And it had a dirt floor, there was very little headroom, and it leaked water like a sieve. Whenever it rained, there was just a river running right through it. I wound up excavating it down, putting in gravel and a concrete floor, and did a lot of waterproofing on the interior, and put in interior drainage so that I've now got a comfortable, dry place to work.
Yeah, do you work down here in the winter as well?
I do. I have a propane heater. But the only problem with working down here in the winter is that it'll get fairly cold down here, down to about 45. And I can turn the heater on and the air temperature will be up to 55, 60 in a matter of minutes. But all of the tools and all of the parts are still cold.